Welcome to Kingdom Thoughts. Today we delve into the book of Genesis, exploring its profound stories and timeless lessons. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. These opening words are perhaps the most famous ever written. They resound with a profound simplicity, yet they carry the weight of eternity. They mark the very start of a narrative that has shaped civilizations and inspired countless souls across millennia. This is not merely an ancient text, it is a living word. It speaks directly to the human heart, inviting us into the grand theater of creation. The book of Genesis doesn't just recount events, it unveils the very character of the Creator. It sets the stage for understanding everything that follows, not just in Scripture, but in our own lives and our quest for meaning. The power of Genesis lies in its timeless relevance. It addresses the most fundamental questions that human beings have always asked. Where do we come from? Why are we here? What is our purpose in this vast, often bewildering universe? These are not questions confined to a single culture or a specific era. They are universal. Genesis offers answers, not in the dry language of a scientific treatise, but through vivid stories. These stories are filled with drama, with joy, with sorrow, and with hope. They speak of humanity's highest aspirations and its deepest flaws. They continue to resonate because they reflect the enduring human condition, our shared experiences of love, loss, faith, and doubt. The very name of the book, Genesis, is rich with meaning. It derives from the Greek word for origin or beginning. And indeed, this is precisely what the book offers, an account of beginnings. It details the beginning of the cosmos, the emergence of life, and the creation of humankind. But it is more than just a cosmic birth story. It also describes the beginning of God's covenant relationship with humanity. It lays the foundation for understanding sin, redemption, and the unwavering faithfulness of God. Genesis is the crucial first chapter, the one that provides the context for all the subsequent chapters in the divine drama. It is the wellspring from which the entire biblical narrative flows. Therefore, to delve into Genesis is to embark on a journey back to the very source. It is an exploration of our spiritual ancestry, a quest to understand our roots. This book is not merely a historical document to be studied dispassionately from a distance. It is an invitation to a personal encounter. It challenges us to consider our own place within this grand narrative of creation and redemption. Genesis reminds us that our individual stories are part of a much larger, divinely authored story. It suggests that our beginnings are intricately linked to God's eternal purposes, offering a perspective that can transform how we view ourselves and our world. The second chapter of Genesis transports us to the idyllic setting of Eden. Here, man walks with God in paradise. Intimacy, innocence, and purpose define the first home. The Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living being, created in God's image, endowed with dignity and purpose. In Eden, humanity experienced perfect harmony with God, each other, and creation. This was a place of profound connection and divine fellowship. The themes introduced in Genesis are paramount and echo throughout the corridors of Scripture. We encounter the majesty of God's creative power, his desire for relationship, and his unwavering holiness. We also witness the tragic entry of sin into the world, an event that fractures the harmony of creation and introduces suffering and separation. Yet, even in the face of human rebellion, Genesis reveals God's persistent grace and his initiative to redeem and restore. The concepts of covenant, promise, sacrifice, and faith are all seated in this fertile ground. These are not abstract theological ideas. They are woven into the fabric of human lives, demonstrating God's interaction with real people in real history. Genesis speaks with enduring relevance because it grapples with the timeless questions of human existence. It confronts the mystery of evil and suffering. It explores the complexities of family relationships, the challenges of faith, and the consequences of human choices. The stories of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, Abraham and Sarah, these are not just ancient tales. They are mirrors reflecting our own struggles, our own hopes, and our own deep-seated need for connection with something or someone greater than ourselves. Genesis provides a framework for making sense of a world that often seems chaotic and broken, offering a narrative of ultimate hope and divine purpose. Understanding Genesis, therefore, is not merely an academic exercise for theologians or historians. It is essential for anyone seeking to comprehend the overarching story of the Bible and God's redemptive plan for humanity. It sets the trajectory for the coming of Jesus Christ, the ultimate seed of the woman promised to crush the serpent's head. The promises made to Abraham, for instance, find their ultimate fulfillment in Christ. The patterns of sin and grace, judgment and mercy are established early in Genesis, preparing us to recognize God's consistent character throughout his dealings with humankind. It is the indispensable prologue to God's grand story of salvation. Approaching the story of the fall of man is like stepping onto sacred ground, an invitation to witness the moment when temptation entered and sin broke what was whole. It is a call to wonder, to ponder the mysteries of human nature, and to discover the foundations of our faith. For many, the sheer scope of Genesis, with its epic narratives spanning generations, can seem daunting. Yet within its ancient verses lies a profound simplicity and a directness that can speak powerfully to the contemporary heart. It is a book that meets us where we are, whether we are seasoned students of Scripture or newcomers seeking to understand the basics of the biblical story. It beckons us to listen. This journey through Genesis is not about memorizing genealogies or dissecting ancient cultural practices, though those elements have their place in deeper study. At its core, it is about encountering God. It is about seeing his hand at work from the very first moment of creation to the intricate sagas of the patriarchs. It is about recognizing his attributes, his power, his wisdom, his love, his justice, and his unwavering faithfulness. As we read these stories, we are invited to reflect on how these same attributes are manifest in our own lives and in the world around us today. The narratives are designed to draw us into a deeper relationship with the author of life himself. Whether you are opening the Bible for the very first time or have read Genesis countless times before, there are always new insights to be gained, fresh perspectives to be discovered. For the new reader, Genesis provides the essential building blocks for understanding the Christian faith. It introduces the core conflict between good and evil, the nature of sin, and God's initial responses to human brokenness. For the longtime believer, revisiting Genesis can be a profound experience of renewal. A reminder of the foundational truths that underpin our hope and a fresh appreciation for the consistency of God's character and plan throughout history. It's a book that grows with us. Therefore, consider this an open invitation to embark on, or perhaps re-embark on, an exploration of this remarkable first book of the Bible. Let us journey together through its narratives of creation, fall, flood, and the lives of the patriarchs. Let us seek to understand not just what happened in the beginning, but what these beginnings mean for us today. For Genesis is not just a record of the past. It is a testament to God's enduring presence and his ongoing work in the world and in our lives. It truly is about your beginning with God, a story that continues to unfold with every generation. The story of Cain and Abel, nestled within the early chapters of Genesis, is a poignant tale of sibling rivalry and the tragic consequences of envy. It is more than just a narrative, it is a profound exploration of the human heart and its capacity for both obedience and jealousy. To truly grasp its message, it helps to understand the motivations and actions of its central characters. The ancient words penned by Moses are not a haphazard collection of tales, but a carefully woven tapestry. This tapestry reveals God's initial designs for creation and humanity. It also charts the early course of our relationship with the divine. Understanding this structure unlocks deeper layers of meaning for us. Genesis naturally unfolds in two primary sections, each with its distinct focus, yet seamlessly connected in their overarching purpose. Think of them as two grand acts in a divine play. The first act lays down the universal truths about God, the world, and all humanity. The second act then zooms in, focusing on a particular family chosen by God to carry his promises forward. This division is crucial. It helps us navigate the vast expanse of time and themes covered in the book. It guides our journey from the creation of all things to the beginnings of a specific people. This thoughtful arrangement makes the profound messages within Genesis more accessible. The first major division, encompassing chapters 1 through 11, is often referred to as the Primeval history. This section deals with events that concern the entire human race and the world at large. It speaks of creation's glory, the innocence of Eden, and the tragic entry of sin. It recounts the devastating flood that reshaped the earth and the scattering of nations at Babel. These are stories of universal beginnings, setting the stage for God's interaction with all humankind. They address the fundamental questions of existence, purpose, and the origins of good and evil, laying a broad foundation for what is to come. Following this universal focus, the second major division, spanning chapters 12 through 50, shifts to what is known as the Patriarchal history. Here, the narrative lens narrows considerably. It concentrates on the lives of key individuals: Abraham, his son Isaac, his grandson Jacob, later named Israel, and Jacob's 12 sons, particularly Joseph. This section details God's covenant relationship with this specific lineage. Through them, God begins to unfold his specific plan of redemption for a broken world. These stories are deeply personal, yet they carry implications for all nations, as promised to Abraham himself. This movement from the universal to the particular is a hallmark of God's unfolding revelation. Section 2, Part 1, Generations of Adam, Genesis 5. The fifth chapter of Genesis chronicles the generations of Adam, presenting a lineage that spans from Adam to Noah. This genealogy is marked by extraordinarily long lifespans, with Methuselah living the longest at 969 years. Each entry follows a pattern: the age at which the individual fathered their first son, the remaining years of their life, and the phrase, "and he died." This repetitive structure underscores the inevitability of death, even amidst the remarkable longevity. Despite the shadow of sin, humanity continues to multiply and fill the earth, fulfilling God's command to be fruitful and multiply. This chapter serves as a bridge connecting the creation narrative with the story of Noah and the flood. It highlights the persistence of life and the continuation of God's plan, even as sin's influence grows. The genealogy also emphasizes the faithfulness of God in preserving a lineage through which his promises will be fulfilled. The brief mentions of each individual remind us that every life, no matter how long, is but a moment in the grand narrative of God's redemptive history. This chapter, with its long lives and short stories, paints a picture of a world multiplying under sin's shadow, yet moving forward in the unfolding story of humanity. It sets the stage for the dramatic events to come. As God's plan for redemption continues to unfold, through the generations. Section 3, Part 2, Corruption and the Flood, begins Genesis 6. In Genesis chapter 6, the earth becomes filled with violence and corruption. Humanity's wickedness grieves God, leading him to decide to cleanse the earth with a flood. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Noah walked with God, and God instructed him to build an ark. Noah obeyed, gathering his family and pairs of every living creature into the ark. The floodwaters came, covering the earth and wiping out all life, except those in the ark. After the flood, God made a covenant with Noah, promising never to destroy the earth with a flood again. This covenant marked a new beginning for humanity, with Noah and his descendants. Section 1. Echoes of Eternity, the Great Flood. Waters rose, but God remembered Noah. Judgment brought renewal. A rainbow sealed the promise. I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign. Genesis 9:13. As Creation Week approached its crescendo, God announced something new. Let us make mankind in our image. Humanity was to be God's representative, reflecting his character. So God created mankind in his own image, male and female. He created them. They were commanded to be fruitful and fill the earth. God instructed them to subdue the earth and rule over every living creature. They were placed in a world designed to sustain them and provide a context for their relationship with God and each other. The Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed the breath of life into him. God planted a garden in Eden where Adam was placed to work and take care of it. God created a woman from Adam's rib, establishing the foundation of marriage. Into this world of perfect harmony, a discordant note was introduced. The serpent, more crafty than any wild animal, appeared. It engaged Eve in conversation, sowing seeds of doubt. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? The serpent twisted God's command, making it seem unreasonable. Eve corrected the serpent, but added her own emphasis. The serpent contradicted God, promising enlightenment. Eve ate the fruit and gave some to Adam, who also ate, leading to their transgression. The moment the forbidden fruit was consumed, a profound change occurred. Their eyes were opened, and they saw their own nakedness. Feeling shame, they covered themselves with fig leaves, hiding from God. God called, "Where are you?" highlighting the relational chasm sin had created. Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent. God pronounced judgments. The serpent was cursed. The woman would experience pain in childbirth, and the man would face toil and frustration. Physical death would be their end, yet a promise of future redemption was given. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. Paradise was lost, but God's redemptive plan was already in motion. The echoes of Eden's gate closing were still fresh when sin, like a venomous vine, began to visibly entwine itself around the human heart. Adam and Eve, now living outside the garden, had sons, Cain, a tiller of the soil, and Abel, a keeper of sheep. In the course of time, both brothers brought offerings to the Lord. Cain presented some of the fruits of his labor from the ground. Abel, in contrast, brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. This act of worship, meant to bridge the gap with God, tragically became the stage for sin's next devastating appearance. It was a moment pregnant with spiritual significance. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. The scriptures do not detail precisely why God responded this way. Perhaps it was the attitude of the heart or the nature of the sacrifice itself. What is clear is Cain's reaction. He was furious and his face was downcast. God, in his patience, spoke to Cain directly. He warned him about the destructive power of anger and sin, which was crouching at his door, desiring to have him. God even offered a way out. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? It was an invitation to self-correction, a moment of grace offered before the fall. Tragically, Cain did not heed God's counsel. He allowed resentment and jealousy to fester in his heart. He spoke with his brother Abel, and while they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother and killed him. The first human life, created in God's image, was violently extinguished by another. The earth itself drank the blood of the innocent. When God confronted Cain, asking, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain's reply was chillingly evasive and defiant. "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" This question has reverberated through human history, a stark reminder of our capacity to deny responsibility and compassion. God then pronounced a curse upon Cain. The ground, now stained with Abel's blood, would no longer yield its crops for him easily. He was condemned to be a restless wanderer on the earth. Yet even in this harsh judgment, a thread of God's perplexing mercy is visible. When Cain lamented that his punishment was more than he could bear, fearing that anyone who found him would kill him, God put a mark on Cain. This mark served as a warning that no one should kill him, a divine protection even for the first murderer. Sin had indeed spread, but God's sovereign involvement, even in judgment and mercy, remained undeniably present. As generations passed after Cain, the ripple effects of sin continued to widen, growing into a tidal wave of corruption that engulfed humanity. The narrative of Genesis paints a grim picture of the world. Mankind's wickedness became so pervasive, so deeply ingrained that it grieved the very heart of God. The sacred text tells us that the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Imagine a world where every thought, every intention was stained by evil. This was not a minor deviation. It was a complete saturation of society with rebellion and godlessness. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. This is a profound statement, revealing not a distant, uncaring deity, but a creator intimately connected to his creation, capable of sorrow over its brokenness. The divine experiment of free will had led to a world spiraling out of control, far from the shalom God intended. The earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. This violence was not just isolated incidents, it was a pervasive atmosphere, a way of life. The fabric of society was tearing apart under the weight of its own depravity. Justice, compassion, and reverence were seemingly extinguished. In this bleak landscape of universal corruption, one man stood apart. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. In a world consumed by evil, Noah's devotion shone like a solitary star in a blackened sky. His righteousness was not self-generated. It was a response to God's grace, a willingness to align his life with divine standards when everyone else had abandoned them. He was a beacon of hope, not because of his own perfection, but because of his consistent walk with the God who saw him. Because of the overwhelming wickedness, God declared his intention to bring judgment upon the earth. He said to Noah, "I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth." Yet, in the midst of this impending judgment, God provided a way of escape for Noah and his family. He gave Noah specific, detailed instructions to build an ark, a massive vessel of gopher wood. This ark would be the means of preservation, a floating sanctuary designed to carry life through the coming deluge. The command was clear, the task immense, a testament to both the severity of the judgment and the meticulousness of God's saving plan. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. This simple statement encapsulates an extraordinary act of faith and obedience. Imagine the sheer scale of the undertaking, constructing a vessel of such immense proportions with no prior shipbuilding experience in a world that likely scoffed at the very idea of a global flood. For years, perhaps decades, Noah and his sons labored, gathering materials, shaping timber, and applying pitch. They gathered the animals, 2 of every kind, male and female, and 7 pairs of every clean animal according to God's instructions. This was not just manual labor, it was a profound act of trust in God's word against all visible evidence. Then the floodwaters came. For 40 days and 40 nights rain fell upon the earth, and the springs of the great deep burst forth. The waters rose, lifting the ark high above the drowning world. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Only Noah and those with him in the ark remained. The ark, a symbol of God's provision and Noah's obedience, floated safely upon the waters, a tiny speck of life in a world otherwise reclaimed by chaos. Inside, a remnant of humanity and the animal kingdom endured, preserved by divine intervention, while the judgment unfolded outside their wooden walls. After many months, the waters began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah patiently waited, sending out a raven and then a dove, searching for signs of dry land. Finally, when the dove returned with a freshly plucked olive leaf, hope stirred. Eventually, God commanded Noah to come out of the ark, along with his family and all the creatures. They stepped onto a cleansed earth, a new beginning. Noah's first act was to build an altar and offer burnt offerings to the Lord, an act of gratitude and worship for their deliverance. The aroma was pleasing to God. In response to Noah's worship and his own enduring love for creation, God made an everlasting covenant. He promised Noah and his descendants and every living creature that never again would all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, God declared, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever the rainbow appears, it serves as a divine reminder of God's faithfulness, his mercy, and his promise to preserve the world. The flood was a devastating judgment, but it was followed by a profound expression of God's grace and his commitment to his creation. Sometime after the Great Flood, as humanity began to multiply and spread once more across the face of the earth, they found themselves unified by a common language and a shared purpose. They migrated eastward and settled in the land of Shinar, a fertile plain. Here, with their growing numbers and developing skills, they conceived an ambitious project. "Come, let us build ourselves a city," they said one to another, "with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Their ingenuity was evident, their desire for community understandable, yet their underlying motivation was problematic. The desire to make a name for ourselves reveals a heart of pride, a yearning for self-glorification and autonomy apart from God. Their aim to build a tower that reached to the heavens was not merely about height. It symbolized an attempt to usurp divine authority, to achieve security and see significance through their own efforts. Furthermore, their fear of being scattered was in direct opposition to God's earlier mandate to be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. Genesis 9:1. They sought to consolidate their power and create a centralized monument to their own achievement rather than disperse and fulfill God's intention for them to populate the globe. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the children of men were building. This is an anthropomorphic expression, highlighting God's intimate awareness of human affairs. He observed their unity and their technological prowess, noting, if, as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. This was not an admission of God's power being threatened, but rather a recognition of humanity's immense potential for both good and ill when unified in purpose, especially a purpose rooted in pride. To prevent this unchecked ambition from leading to further deviation, God intervened. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other, God declared. And so the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. This event explains the origin of diverse languages and cultures, but more importantly, it serves as a powerful lesson. It demonstrates God's sovereignty over human ambition and his resistance to human pride. It underscores the truth that true unity and purpose are found not in self-exaltation, but in humble obedience to the Creator's design. As the narrative of Genesis transitions from the broad strokes of universal history, a new chapter unfolds. God's divine lens begins to narrow, focusing intensely on a specific lineage. This is the era of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, followed by the dramatic story of Jacob's son, Joseph. These men were not legendary heroes of flawless character. They were ordinary individuals marked by relatable human strengths and weaknesses. Yet God, in his sovereign wisdom and grace, chose them. He called them to embark on extraordinary journeys of faith. Through them, he would lay the foundations for a chosen people and begin to reveal his grand overarching plan for the redemption of all humanity. Their stories are the bedrock of Israel's identity. The very concept of a patriarch in Genesis is deeply significant. These were the founding fathers, the heads of their families, who received direct revelations and promises from God. They were the initial bearers of the covenant, a sacred agreement binding God to his chosen people and his people to him. This covenant was not a contract between equals. It was an initiative of divine grace. God chose them not because of any inherent merit they possessed, but because of his own purposes and his unwavering love. Their lives become a testament to how God can work through imperfect vessels to achieve his perfect will. Their stories invite us to see God's hand in the ordinary and the extraordinary. The central theme woven through the patriarchal narratives is the unfolding of God's promises. These promises typically revolved around three key elements: the promise of numerous descendants, the promise of a specific land, and the promise of a unique relationship with God that would extend blessing to all nations. Each patriarch, in his own way, wrestled with these promises. They faced doubts, encountered obstacles, and made mistakes. Yet, through it all, God remained steadfast. Their journeys were not smooth paths, but rather winding roads filled with tests of faith, moments of profound encounter, and the gradual realization of God's faithfulness despite their human frailties. The collective legacy of these patriarchs is immeasurable. They are not just historical figures, they are spiritual ancestors whose faith, struggles, and encounters with God continue to inspire and instruct. Their stories teach us about the nature of faith itself, a faith that trusts in the unseen, that perseveres through trial, and that ultimately rests on the character of God. They demonstrate that God is a personal God, intimately involved in the lives of individuals and families. As we delve into their individual stories, we see more clearly how God's redemptive purpose, hinted at in Eden, begins to take tangible shape, preparing the way for future generations and ultimately for the Messiah. The story of Abraham, originally Abram, marks a pivotal turning point in God's interaction with humanity. Living in Ur of the Chaldees, a prosperous but pagan city, Abram received a direct and astonishing call from God. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I show you. This was no small request. It demanded radical obedience, a willingness to leave behind all that was familiar, his culture, his security, his extended family, and venture into the unknown, guided only by a divine promise. God's promise was threefold. He would make Abram into a great nation. He would bless him and make his name great, and all peoples on earth would be blessed through him. Abram's response to this call is a hallmark of his character. He went as the Lord had told him. This simple act of obedience, undertaken in faith, set in motion a chain of events that would shape world history. The covenant God established with Abraham was profound. God promised him descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, a promise that seemed impossible given that his wife Sarai, later Sarah, was barren and they were both advanced in age. Yet Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. This highlights a core biblical truth. Faith is the foundation of our relationship with God. Abraham's journey of faith was not without its stumbles. There were moments of doubt, fear, and human weakness, such as when he passed Sarah off as his sister in Egypt and Gerar. He and Sarah even tried to fulfill God's promise through their own means, leading to the birth of Ishmael through Hagar. Yet God remained patient and faithful, reiterating his covenant and eventually fulfilling his promise of a son through Sarah, Isaac. Perhaps the most profound test of Abraham's faith came when God commanded him to sacrifice Isaac, the long-awaited child of promise. Abraham's willingness to obey, trusting that God could even raise Isaac from the dead, demonstrated the depth of his devotion and earned him the title Friend of God. Ultimately, God provided a ram as a substitute for Isaac, affirming his own provision and mercy. Abraham's life teaches us that faith is not about perfection, but about a persistent trust in God's character and promises. Even when circumstances seem contradictory, he is revered as the father of all who believe, both Jews and Gentiles, because his life exemplifies a relational trust that God honors. His story is a powerful reminder that God calls ordinary people to extraordinary purposes, and that his faithfulness undergirds our often faltering steps of faith. Abraham's legacy is one of unwavering hope in a covenant-keeping God. Isaac's life story begins with a miracle, a testament to God's power to fulfill his promises against all odds. He was the long-awaited son of Abraham and Sarah, born when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah 90. His very name, meaning he laughs, reflects Sarah's initial incredulous laughter when she overheard the divine promise of a son in her old age, and later the sheer joy that his birth brought. Isaac was not just any child, he was the child of the covenant, the heir through whom God's promises to Abraham of land, descendants, and blessing were to be carried forward. His existence was a living symbol of God's faithfulness. One of the most defining and harrowing episodes in Isaac's early life was his father Abraham's willingness to offer him as a sacrifice on Mount Moriah. While the focus is often on Abraham's faith, Isaac's quiet submission in this terrifying ordeal is also deeply significant. He questioned his father, "Where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" but then allowed himself to be bound and placed upon the altar. This event foreshadows a greater sacrifice to come, and it undoubtedly shaped Isaac's understanding of God's sovereignty and provision. It was a profound test not just for Abraham, but for the lineage of promise itself, demonstrating that God is the ultimate giver and sustainer of life. Compared to his dynamic father Abraham and his complex son Jacob, Isaac's life narrative in Genesis appears less turbulent, characterized by a more contemplative and steadfast faith. He redug the wells of his father, a symbolic act of preserving and continuing the heritage he had received. God reaffirmed the Abrahamic covenant with Isaac, promising him the same blessings of land and numerous descendants. His marriage to Rebekah, orchestrated through the faithful efforts of Abraham's servant and divine guidance, ensured the continuation of the chosen line. Isaac's life, though perhaps less dramatic, was crucial in bridging the generations and maintaining the integrity of God's unfolding plan. Even in Isaac's later years, marked by failing eyesight and family tensions surrounding his sons Esau and Jacob, God's purposes continued to advance. The flawed blessing of Jacob, though achieved through deception, ultimately aligned with God's sovereign will for the younger to inherit the covenantal promises. Isaac's story teaches us the importance of faithfulness in the seemingly ordinary stretches of life. Not every life is called to the dramatic pioneering of an Abraham or the intense wrestling of a Jacob. Isaac's legacy is one of quiet endurance, patient trust, and faithful stewardship of the promises he inherited, ensuring they were passed to the next generation. Jacob's story is one of the most complex and compelling in Genesis, a narrative of a flawed man relentlessly pursued and profoundly transformed by God. From his very birth, where he grasped his twin brother Esau's heel, Jacob's name, meaning supplanter or deceiver, seemed to define his character, driven by ambition and a desire for the birthright and blessing that belonged to his elder brother. Jacob resorted to cunning and manipulation. He tricked Esau out of his birthright for a bowl of stew, and with his mother Rebekah's help, deceived his aging father Isaac to steal the patriarchal blessing. His early life was marked by self-reliance and a tendency to achieve his goals through his own scheming. Forced to flee Esau's murderous rage, Jacob embarked on a journey that became a spiritual pilgrimage. At Bethel, alone and afraid, he had a powerful dream of a ladder reaching to heaven with angels ascending and descending. God stood above it and renewed the covenant promises made to Abraham and Isaac, assuring Jacob of his presence and protection. Jacob awoke in awe, recognizing the sanctity of the place and vowing to serve God if he would indeed be with him. This encounter was a pivotal moment, the beginning of God's direct dealing with Jacob, planting seeds of faith in a heart accustomed to self-effort. It was a promise of divine companionship on his uncertain path. Jacob's years spent with his uncle Laban in Haran were a period of further shaping, where the deceiver himself was often deceived. He worked 14 years for his wives Leah and Rachel and endured Laban's changing wages. Yet during this time, God blessed him immensely with a large family, including 12 sons who would become the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel, and with considerable wealth. These years were a crucible, teaching Jacob patience, perseverance, and a growing awareness of his dependence on God's provision rather than solely on his own ingenuity. Despite the family drama and personal failings, God's covenant purpose was steadily advancing through him. The defining moment of Jacob's transformation occurred on the eve of his feared reunion with Esau. He spent a night alone wrestling with a mysterious man until daybreak. This man, understood to be a Christophany or an angel of God, blessed Jacob and changed his name to Israel, meaning he struggles with God or God strives. Jacob emerged from this encounter physically lamed but spiritually transformed. He had contended with God and with humans and had overcome not by his own strength but by clinging to God in desperate faith. This wrestling match symbolized his life's journey, moving from a self-reliant schemer to a man humbled and blessed by the tenacious grace of God. The story of Joseph, Jacob's favorite son, occupies the final section of Genesis and stands as a profound testament to God's sovereign providence working through human suffering and sin. Joseph's early life was marked by his father's overt partiality, exemplified by the gift of a richly ornamented robe, and by his own youthful dreams foretelling his future exaltation over his family. These factors fueled the intense jealousy of his 10 older brothers. Their resentment festered until, driven by envy and malice, they betrayed him, selling him into slavery to Midianite traders heading for Egypt. They then deceived their father Jacob into believing Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Joseph's trials continued in Egypt. Sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, he served faithfully and rose to prominence in the household. However, his integrity was tested when Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of attempted assault after he resisted her advances. Unjustly, Joseph was thrown into prison, yet even in the darkness of the dungeon, the Lord was with him. Joseph maintained his character, and God granted him favor with the prison warden. He became known for his wisdom and his God-given ability to interpret dreams, first for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, though he was subsequently forgotten by the cupbearer for 2 long years. Joseph's fortunes dramatically changed when Pharaoh himself was troubled by disturbing dreams that no magician or wise man in Egypt could interpret. The chief cupbearer finally remembered Joseph, who was then summoned from prison. Attributing his ability solely to God, Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, foretelling 7 years of abundant harvest to be followed by 7 years of severe famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom and the Spirit of God clearly upon him, Pharaoh elevated him to the second highest position in Egypt, entrusting him with preparing the nation for the coming crisis. Joseph's administrative skill and foresight saved Egypt from starvation. The climax of Joseph's story arrives when the famine forces his unknowing brothers to come to Egypt seeking grain. After a series of tests designed to reveal their character and repentance, Joseph dramatically revealed his identity. Instead of vengeance, he offered forgiveness and a profound theological insight into their past actions. "You intended to harm me," he told them, "but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's life beautifully illustrates that God can weave even the most painful betrayals and injustices into his magnificent tapestry of redemption, ultimately preserving his chosen people and setting the stage for their future growth in Egypt. The divine artisan, God as sovereign creator. Genesis opens with a declaration of breathtaking scope. God is the ultimate source of all that exists. Before time, before matter, before light, there was God. He spoke, and reality unfolded in intricate layers of beauty and order. This was not a chaotic accident, but a deliberate act of divine will. The stars, the seas, the land, and every living thing came into being at his command. This foundational truth from Genesis teaches us that the universe is not a random occurrence. It is the purposeful handiwork of a master designer. You were designed on purpose. Every detail, from the grand sweep of galaxies to the smallest particle, reflects his intelligent and powerful nature, inviting us into a posture of awe. The narrative of creation in Genesis repeatedly emphasizes the goodness of God's work. After each stage of creation, the refrain echoes, "And God saw that it was good." This goodness culminates in the creation of humanity. We are told that men and women were made in God's own image. This sets humanity apart, bestowing unique dignity, purpose, and a capacity for relationship with the Creator. We are not mere biological accidents. We are reflections of God Himself, intended to mirror His character in the world. This understanding forms the very basis of human value and our inherent worth. a profound truth that Genesis establishes from the outset of its sacred pages. God's role as creator did not end with the 6 days of creation. He planted a garden, a place of perfect communion, and placed humanity within it. This act signifies his desire for an ongoing, intimate relationship with his creation, particularly with humankind. He walked with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day. This beautiful imagery speaks of a closeness, a fellowship that was part of God's original design. Even after the fall, his creative power remains active, working to renew and restore. The lesson is clear. Our Creator is not distant or detached. He is a relational God, deeply invested in the world he made and the people he formed. Understanding God as the sovereign creator profoundly shapes our worldview and our self-perception. It means that life has inherent meaning. It means that we are not cosmic orphans, but beloved creations. When we look at the wonders of the natural world, we see the brushstrokes of the divine artisan. When we consider our own unique abilities and potential, we recognize the imprint of his image within us. This truth anchors us, giving us a sense of belonging and purpose. It calls us to live not as random beings, but as those intentionally crafted by a loving God, inviting us to explore the depths of his creative genius in our lives and the world around us. The scales of justice, the embrace of grace, God as judge and redeemer. Genesis unflinchingly presents God as a God of perfect justice. When humanity chose a path of disobedience, beginning with Adam and Eve in the garden, sin entered the world. This act of rebellion had profound consequences, not because God is vindictive, but because he is holy. Sin is a serious affront to his nature and his created order. We see this theme of judgment unfold: the exile from Eden, the tragedy of Cain and Abel, the pervasive corruption that led to the great flood, and the prideful ambition at Babel. These narratives reveal that actions have consequences. God's justice means that sin cannot be ignored or trivialized. It inevitably leads to separation and brokenness. The judgments depicted in Genesis are never arbitrary or capricious. They are the righteous responses of a holy God to the destructive nature of sin. God's standards are perfect, and any deviation from them disrupts the harmony he intended for his creation. The flood, for example, was a response to a world where every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Yet, even in his role as judge, God's sorrow is palpable. He is grieved by human wickedness. This shows us that his judgments are not born of anger alone, but from a pained love that must address the cancer of sin to preserve any hope for goodness and ultimate restoration. Crucially, alongside God's role as judge, Genesis powerfully reveals him as redeemer. He does not give up on humanity. Even as judgment is pronounced upon Adam and Eve, there is a glimmer of hope, the promise that the seed of Barav Hamtalis of the woman will crush the serpent's head. Genesis 3:15. This is the first hint of the gospel, a foreshadowing of future redemption. When the world was overcome with violence, God in his mercy saved Noah and his family through the ark. He initiated a plan not just to punish, but to preserve and to begin anew. His redemptive heart is always seeking a way back for his fallen creation, a path towards healing. This divine tension between justice and redemption is central to understanding God's character in Genesis. He is not one-dimensional. His holiness demands that sin be addressed, yet his love compels him to offer a way out, a path to reconciliation. The stories of Genesis show that God consistently makes a way where there seems to be no way. He doesn't abandon his creation to the full consequences of its choices without also extending an offer of grace. This enduring truth that God is both a righteous judge and a compassionate redeemer provides a foundation for hope. He doesn't give up on us, always working towards restoration and renewal, even in our deepest failings. the unbreakable bond, God as faithful covenant keeper. One of the most profound lessons about God revealed in Genesis is his nature as a covenant keeper. A covenant in this biblical context is more than a mere contract. It is a sacred relational bond initiated by God himself. He chooses to bind himself to his people through solemn promises. This is not an agreement between equals. It is an act of divine grace, where God sets the terms and commits his own faithfulness to the relationship. From the covenant with Noah, symbolized by the rainbow, to the foundational covenant with Abraham, Genesis shows God repeatedly reaching out to establish and maintain these special relationships. His desire is to draw humanity into his purposes. The covenant with Abraham is a cornerstone of Genesis and indeed the entire Bible. God promised Abraham land, countless descendants, and that through him all the families of the earth would be blessed. These were audacious promises, especially given Abraham and Sarah's advanced age and barrenness. Yet God bound himself to these words. The narrative details the long journey of Abraham's faith, his moments of doubt, and his ultimate trust in God's ability to fulfill what he had promised. God's commitment to this covenant did not waver even when human frailty was evident. This teaches us that God's promises are not contingent on human perfection, but on his own unwavering character. The faithfulness of God as a covenant keeper shines brightly even when his human partners falter. Abraham doubted, Jacob deceived, and their descendants often strayed. Yet, God's commitment to his covenant promises remained steadfast. He patiently worked through their imperfections, guiding them, correcting them, and always bringing them back to the path of his purpose. The lives of Isaac and Jacob demonstrate the continuation of this covenant relationship through generations. God reiterates his promises to them, showing that his plans are not easily thwarted by human weakness. His faithfulness endures beyond our own inconsistencies, a testament to his profound patience and long-suffering love. This lesson about God as a covenant keeper is a source of immense security and hope. It tells us that God's promises are eternal and trustworthy. When he makes a commitment, he sees it through. His word is his bond. This aspect of his character, so clearly established in Genesis, provides a bedrock for faith. It assures us that God is not fickle or unreliable. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The covenants in Genesis lay the groundwork for understanding God's ultimate covenant relationship with humanity through Jesus Christ, showing a consistent pattern of God's initiative to secure a people for himself, bound by his unfailing love and unbreakable promises. Throughout the diverse narratives of Genesis, from the splendor of Eden to the trials in Egypt, God's consistent presence is a powerful underlying theme. He is not a distant deity observing from afar. He is intimately involved in the affairs of humanity. We see him walking in the garden with Adam and Eve. He speaks directly to Cain. He closes the door of the ark for Noah. He appears to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. He wrestles with Jacob at Peniel. He is with Joseph in the pit, in Potiphar's house, in prison, and ultimately in Pharaoh's palace. This active presence demonstrates his care and his constant engagement with the world he created and the people he loves. God's presence in Genesis is not merely passive companionship. It is dynamic and purposeful. He guides, he protects, he disciplines, and he provides. Abraham is led to an unknown land. Hagar is comforted in the wilderness. Isaac is provided for. Jacob is transformed through divine encounters. Joseph is elevated to save many lives. Even when circumstances seem bleak and human actions are driven by sin or folly, God's unseen hand is often at work, steering events towards his ultimate designs. This teaches us that God is sovereign over history, capable of weaving even the tangled threads of human choices into a tapestry that fulfills his good and redemptive purposes for his people. The story of Joseph beautifully encapsulates this lesson. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and forgotten in prison, Joseph endured immense suffering. Yet through it all, God was with him, preparing him and positioning him for a crucial role. Joseph's profound declaration to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good," reveals a deep understanding of God's sovereign and purposeful presence. God did not cause the evil actions, but he was able to redeem them, using them to preserve life and to advance his covenant plan for Israel. This shows that no situation is beyond God's ability to work for ultimate good. This understanding of God as ever-present and purposeful, as seen so vividly in Genesis, offers profound comfort and meaning for our lives today. It assures us that we are never truly alone. Even in our darkest valleys or most confusing circumstances, God is with us. His presence is not always felt in dramatic ways, but it is constant. Furthermore, it reminds us that our lives are part of a larger, divinely authored story. He has a plan, and he is working all things according to his will. Trusting in his presence and his overarching purpose allows us to face the future not with fear, but with faith, knowing that the God of Genesis is also our God today. Woven with intent, discovering your divine blueprint. The sprawling narratives of Genesis, from the cosmic dance of creation to the intricate dramas of human families, converge on a deeply personal truth. You were made with intention. The God who spoke galaxies into existence and meticulously formed the first humans did not suddenly become haphazard when it came to your life. Just as Adam and Eve were breathed into being with purpose, placed in a garden prepared for them, so too are you a deliberate thought in the mind of the Creator. This is not poetic hyperbole. It is a foundational assertion stemming from the very character of God revealed in Genesis. He is a God of order, design, and benevolent purpose. Your existence is a testament to this enduring truth. Consider the sheer wonder of being made in the image of God. This profound statement, introduced in the opening chapter of Genesis, elevates humanity beyond mere biological existence. It means you carry within you a reflection, however faint or marred by life's struggles, of the divine. It speaks of an inherent dignity, a capacity for love, creativity, reason, and relationship that echoes the nature of God himself. This divine imprint is not earned, it is given. It is the starting point of your story, a declaration of your intrinsic value before you achieve anything or make any mark on the world. You are not an accident nor a random collection of molecules. You are a carefully crafted being, designed for connection with your Maker. The stories of Genesis, while ancient, resonate with this theme of intentionality. God's interaction with each character, from Noah to Abraham, from Sarah to Joseph, reveals a consistent pattern of purposeful engagement. He calls, he guides, he shapes, and he works through their unique circumstances. Even their flaws and the complexities of their lives do not negate his overarching intention for them. This should bring immense comfort and encouragement. Your life, with all its unique contours, its joys and its sorrows, its strengths and its weaknesses, is a canvas upon which God is still working. He has a specific design in mind, a role for you to play in his unfolding story. Therefore, the invitation from Genesis is to look beyond the surface of your daily life and to seek the deeper currents of divine intention. What passions has God placed within your heart? What unique gifts and talents has he entrusted to you? How might your personal story, your experiences, be part of a larger narrative he is writing? Discovering your divine blueprint is not always a sudden revelation, but often a gradual unfolding. A journey of listening, trusting, and stepping out in faith. It begins with embracing the truth that your life matters profoundly to the one who first breathed life into humanity in a garden long ago. You are his workmanship. redeemed by grace, finding purpose beyond failure. The narratives of Genesis are strikingly honest about human frailty, from Adam and Eve's disobedience in Eden to Cain's murderous rage, from Noah's later failing to the deceptions of Jacob. The pages are filled with stories of imperfect people. These accounts are not there to merely chronicle ancient misdeeds. They serve a far more profound purpose, to demonstrate that our failures do not disqualify us from God's plan. This is a message of enduring hope. If God could work through the flawed patriarchs and matriarchs of old, then surely He can work through our own imperfect lives. His grace is consistently shown to be greater than our sin. Think of Abraham, the father of faith. His journey was marked by moments of fear and poor judgment, such as when he twice presented Sarah as his sister. Yet God did not abandon him. Instead, He patiently guided Abraham, reaffirmed His promises, and continued to shape him into the man He called him to be. Consider Jacob, the deceiver, who wrestled with God and emerged transformed, renamed Israel. His past did not define his future in God's eyes. These stories are not exceptions. They are illustrations of a fundamental divine principle. God's redemptive power can overwrite our deepest regrets and redirect our misguided paths. He sees not just who we are, but who we can become through His grace. This truth offers profound liberation. Many of us carry the weight of past mistakes, believing they have irrevocably damaged our potential or rendered us unusable for any significant purpose. Genesis counters this despair in narrative. It shows a God who specializes in new beginnings, who consistently chooses the unlikely and the imperfect to accomplish His will. Your failures, your missteps, your moments of doubt, these do not have the final say. God's plan for your life is robust enough to incorporate your humanity, your struggles, and even your sins, weaving them into a larger tapestry of redemption if you turn towards Him. He is a God of second chances and third chances and beyond. Therefore, the invitation of Genesis is to bring your whole self to God, your triumphs and your transgressions. Do not let shame or regret keep you hidden as Adam and Eve hid in the garden. Instead, come into the light of His presence, where forgiveness and restoration are found. God's plan for you is not nullified by your imperfections. Often it is through the very process of acknowledging our need for Him and our failures that He draws us closer and equips us for His service. Your story is not over because of past mistakes. With God, every moment is an opportunity for His redemptive work to continue transforming your broken pieces into a vessel for His glory. He still has a plan. The unseen anchor faith, forgiveness, and freedom. The journey through Genesis consistently underscores the vital importance of faith. Faith in the biblical sense is not a blind leap into the dark, nor is it merely intellectual assent to a set of doctrines. It is a profound trust in God's character, His promises, and His unseen presence, even when circumstances seem to contradict His word. Abraham was called to leave his home for an unknown land, trusting solely in God's guidance. Noah built an ark for a flood that had never been seen, trusting in God's warning and provision. Their stories, and many others in Genesis, teach us that faith means relying on God's reality more than our own perception of reality. It is holding on to the unseen anchor in the storms of life. This kind of faith is rarely easy. It often involves waiting, persevering through uncertainty, and making choices that seem counterintuitive to worldly wisdom. Sarah waited decades for the promised son, Isaac. Joseph endured years of injustice, from betrayal by his brothers to wrongful imprisonment, before seeing God's ultimate plan unfold. Their experiences remind us that God's timing is not always our timing. Faith is cultivated in the waiting rooms of life, in the moments when we cannot see the path ahead, but choose to trust the one who holds the map. It is a quiet confidence that God is at work, even when his hand is not immediately visible to us. Alongside faith, the story of Joseph in particular illuminates the transformative power of forgiveness. Joseph had every reason to harbor bitterness and seek revenge against his brothers who had sold him into slavery. Their actions caused him immense suffering and loss. Yet when he finally had the power to retaliate, he chose a different path. He offered forgiveness, recognizing a larger divine purpose at play. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. This act of forgiveness was not a denial of the pain he endured, but a release of its power over him. It broke the cycle of bitterness and paved the way for reconciliation and healing within his fractured family. Joseph's example challenges us to consider the role of forgiveness in our own lives. Unforgiveness, like a heavy chain, can bind us to past hurts, stunting our spiritual and emotional growth. It keeps the wounds fresh and allows bitterness to take root. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is a pathway to freedom. It is a conscious choice to release the offender from the debt we feel they owe us, and in doing so, we release ourselves. Like Joseph, when we choose to forgive, we open ourselves up to see God's potential for bringing good even out of painful situations, enabling us to move forward unencumbered by the weight of past grievances. It is a vital key to breaking generational cycles of brokenness. From every ending, a new dawn, embracing God's new beginnings. The overarching message of Genesis, from its opening verses to its concluding chapters, is one of hope and the unwavering possibility of new beginnings with God. We witness creation itself emerging from a formless void, a divine "let there be" that speaks life into existence. After the devastation of the flood, Noah and his family step out onto a cleansed earth, offered a fresh start under God's covenant rainbow. Abraham is called out of a pagan culture to father a new nation. Jacob, the deceiver, is given a new name and a new identity. Joseph, left for dead by his brothers, rises to save them and many others, initiating a new chapter for his family in Egypt. Each story echoes the truth that God is a specialist in turning endings into new beginnings. This divine pattern is not confined to the ancient past. It is an active principle in our lives today. We all face endings: the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, the close of a particular season of life, or the painful consequences of our own choices. These moments can feel like definitive conclusions, leaving us disoriented or despairing. Yet, the God of Genesis invites us to look beyond the immediate pain of an ending and to anticipate the possibility of his new dawn. He is a God who can bring life out of death, order out of chaos, and hope out of despair. Every sunset in his economy can be the precursor to a sunrise. Embracing God's new beginnings requires faith. Much like the patriarchs and matriarchs we have explored, it means trusting that even when one door closes, God is able to open another. It means believing that he can redeem our past and weave even our most difficult experiences into a future filled with purpose. It requires a willingness to let go of what was in order to grasp what can be in him. This is not about denying the grief or pain that often accompanies endings, but about not allowing that grief to extinguish the hope of what God might do next. He is always working, always creating, always moving towards restoration and renewal. As we conclude this journey through the foundational book of Genesis, let its timeless truths settle deep within your spirit. You are created with divine intention. Your failures do not define your ultimate destiny in God's gracious hands. True faith anchors you to the unseen, and forgiveness sets you free. And perhaps most powerfully, remember that with God, every ending holds the potential for a new, glorious beginning. May you walk forward from this understanding with renewed hope, courage, and a deeper trust in the God who began it all and who is still faithfully writing your story. His love endures, His promises are true, and His power to make all things new is an ever-present reality. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to Kingdom Thoughts for more insightful content.